Welcome to my short recap of Game 3 of the 2023 FIDE Women's World Chess Championship. But before I get into the game, just a couple of things. One, I noticed yesterday that Gotham Chess did record a recap of the first two games. It was a little late. He's not hurrying to get them out within 20 minutes like he did for the World Championship earlier this year, but he is doing them. So if you want a little bit more expert commentary on these games, but also longer videos, feel free to check his out. Another thing is, yesterday, YouTube notified me that I was eligible for the YouTube Partners Program. As far as I can tell, that's one of the first steps toward monetization of my channel, which is pretty cool if you think about it. I don't need income from this. I'm doing this just to get better at chess. But if I get a few cents here and there, it won't hurt my feelings. But I don't get to control the ads on my channel until I reach at least 1,000 subscribers. They made that very clear. So if you do see any ads on my channel up to this point in all the older videos, I didn't put them there. YouTube put them there. I can't take them off. I don't earn anything from that. That's just the way it goes. But let's take a look at this game. I have pulled it up here on Lichess, which was the easiest place I could find to find this game. The game review on Lichess said both players again played in the high 90% accuracy, but this time the defending champion had 1 inaccuracy and the challenger had 2 inaccuracies. If you've noticed me saying defending champ and challenger, that's because I'm not sure how to pronounce both of their names, and I really don't want to embarrass myself or them, and I certainly don't want to lead anyone else wrong by mispronouncing them. The defending champion's name looks a little easier to pronounce, but I'm just not sure. They are both grandmasters, they're both rated above 2500 FIDE, and in this game, the challenger has the white pieces, and the defending champ has the black pieces. They did open with the Ruy Lopez, just as they did in the first game, and just as in the first game, the defending champ played knight to f6, which I believe is the Berlin defense variation of the Ruy Lopez. I'm going to click this opening book to make sure that I'm correct about that. It is the Ruy Lopez Berlin defense. I remembered that from the first game, and I don't know how many moves in this game they followed the exact move order of the first game, but I do remember both of those moves being played. I just don't know if it was in the same order. Now in this game, the first inaccuracy came on move 12, so I'm just going to scoot out to that point. This looks a little different than the first game already, but I'm not 100% certain. At this point, the evaluation is staying between +1 and -1, which openings usually do between players of this caliber. And here, after the defending champ played h6 to kick out that bishop, Stockfish says the only move that maintains any sort of advantage for white is to drop this bishop back to h4. And at that point, according to the line that the engine came up with, black would play rook to e8, hitting this pawn, which is already currently attacked by the knight. But of course, the knight would still be pinned by this bishop, so I'm not sure exactly how that would play out. And it says at that point that white would play rook to e1 to help defend that pawn, I assume, or just putting a rook on the semi-open file. But here, white played one of 2 inaccuracies in the game, and that was playing bishop to f4. And somehow that gives black a very slight advantage, according to the engine here, but only if black plays one of 2 moves, and one of them is knight to h5. Of course, that would attack the bishop, and of course that move wouldn't have been possible if the bishop had gone where the engine had suggested it went. But the engine does say that if black did play knight to h5, then white would just drop this bishop back here, and black wouldn't take it. The only other move that gives any advantage to black at this point is c5, which I guess is an attempt to undouble these pawns. And it says white would probably take, and then instead of redoubling the pawns by taking this way, black would take with the bishop on c5. I'm not sure about that because that would remove 2 of the pawns that are between these 2 queens, so I don't know if either player is ready to do that at this point. I certainly wouldn't be. That means that at any time that this knight moves, then the queens are facing each other. Although it looks like both of their queens are defended by rooks, so maybe a queen trade would be something that they would both be interested in. However, the defending champ did not play either one of those suggested moves, but they did move the rook over at this point, hitting that e-pawn. The engine says rook to e1 is the best response to that, to add another defender to the e-pawn, but white played the second best move, which is queen to c2, which defends it this way. Stockfish says black can go ahead and take here, so that's what the defending champ did. And I'm just going over these moves here because this is the point on the graph that the game review produced at which there was the greatest variance from 0 on the evaluation. We saw just a little bit ago that white had an advantage as high as 0.7, and now black has an advantage of -0.5. So there was a little bit of a swing there. And like I think I've mentioned before, those swings are more significant for grandmasters than they are for us. For us, we pretty much need to get outside of +1 or -1, or at least I do. And here the best move is to take back with the knight. So that is what the challenger plays. And the best move here is bishop to f5. So that's what the defending champ plays. Rook f to e1 is the best move according to Stockfish. d5 is the best move according to Stockfish. So both of them are playing absolute best moves at this point. Same with knight to e5 here, which puts a knight on an outpost. I'm not sure about that because they could attack it with a pawn, but that is what Stockfish recommended, and Stockfish does not recommend attacking it with a pawn. Here, Stockfish actually recommends taking this knight with the pawn, and that looks fairly obvious to me, and that's why I don't understand moving this knight in here in the first place. Why wouldn't you take a knight for a pawn? And why would you leave your knight there hanging? I guess maybe she felt like there wasn't a good option. But again, Stockfish did recommend moving the knight in there and letting this back knight hang with that pawn. And Stockfish does say to take it. But the second best move is to take this knight with the bishop. Either way that knight's going. The defending champ played that second best move. Queen to c3 is the top move here because, of course, the queen was in danger from this bishop. And queen to f6 is the top move recommended by Stockfish for black. Looks like this bishop is hanging, so it seems fairly obvious to move it. One move is better than the others, and that's what the challenger played. And it looks like both players played the best moves here for quite a string, including that one. But here, the challenger is supposed to play rook to c1, rook a to c1, or h4, which I'm not sure I understand. Does that open up for this bishop to come back down? No, because h4 would only be defended by the bishop. So then if you moved the bishop anywhere, that would just be a free pawn, wouldn't it? I'm not sure why h4 is recommended. Or rook a to d1. So it wants to get that a rook over here onto one of these files, either behind the queen or behind the e pawn. Sorry, the d pawn. And here's where the challenger played her second inaccuracy, which was to play king to h1. And that takes the evaluation to the largest swing that black ever got in this game, which is minus 0.8. The engine wants to take this knight with the rook, which I'm just not sure about. Is that a problem? Because that opens up this diagonal for the bishop, but that pawn's defended, and I assume it would be easy enough to defend it another way, or putting the queen back down here to defend it if this dark squared bishop ever had to move. So I don't know why black would want to give up the rook for the knight. Perhaps someone higher rated than me could explain why that's important. It just doesn't look like it's a good idea. Another move that would have held a pretty good advantage for black is h5 at this point. The defending champ played instead a5, which was not counted as an inaccuracy and does maintain a little bit of an advantage. f3 is the best move here, trying to kick out the light squared bishop. And in just a few moves, with both players playing among the top moves, the evaluation comes back pretty close to 0. But that happened here on move 23 after a little bit of an inaccuracy on the defending champ's part. At least according to the game review, it said the next move was an inaccuracy, but I'm looking at the evaluation up here at the top by Stockfish running at a depth of 37. It says c5 is the best move. Queen to d8 is also pretty good. So those are the two top recommended moves along with h4. And the defending champ did play c5, which is listed as the top move, but the game review counted that as an inaccuracy. That's interesting, but it took the evaluation back to 0, and it looks like it was zeros from here on out with very slight shifts into 0.1 or minus 0.1. So I'm going to turn off the engine to save my computer just a little bit. Also, I think it's important to look at the clocks. I don't know if these clocks are accurate to the game clock. I hope that they are. I actually watched just the last bit of this live stream on YouTube, and I did know that both players were getting fairly low on time. We're only on move 23. If you followed these high-level games before, you know that they don't get their extra time bonus until move 40. And also in this tournament, they're not allowed to offer a draw until move 40. So both players had to play very precisely given their low time and also hoping to hold on to a fairly even evaluation until they got their extra time. It shows both players under 20 minutes. I think they started with something like 90 minutes or 2 hours. I don't remember exactly. And now they've gotten down to an opposite colored bishop endgame, which very often can lead to drawish positions. And of course, the engine does rate it as zeros here. White picks off that hanging pawn down there, and the players are even on material. For someone at my level, it's very difficult to determine exactly what you could play here trying to gain an advantage, but it looks like both players are just worried about these two passed pawns. There's a passed black pawn in the middle and a passed white pawn on the flank, but both players have two rooks and a bishop, so it looks like they'll be able to blockade these pawns or track them down. The challenger brings the bishop back to force that rook to move, which it does, challenging the bishop, and then the rook comes over to defend the bishop, and the other rook comes down to defend the first rook. So the defending champ now has two rooks on the second rank of white. I turned the engine back on just out of curiosity, but it looks like there's quite a few moves here that maintain drawish chances for white. One is to advance this pawn, one is to trade rooks right here, another is to move this bishop over. Well, the challenger did play one of those moves, moved the pawn forward, so this bishop has to go to try to blockade it, which apparently was the best move in the position. And then the challenger did the rook trade there on c2, so now they're down to 1 rook each and opposite colored bishops. And again, take a look at the clocks. The challenger only has 4 minutes left on her clock, and the defending champ has less than 10 minutes. During the live stream, it looked like both players were looking for a way to either force a draw or at least hold on to an even position until they got their bonus time. So white moves that bishop out of danger, and black puts that bishop in front of the pawn so it can't go anywhere. You'll notice that both these bishops are blockading pawns here, and the other 6 pawns on the board are all facing each other. White has a rook on the back rank, so they're not worried about a rook infiltration here. I do notice that both players still have their kings on the back rank, which one thing we're taught as learning chess players, once you get to an end game, you want to bring your king toward the center, at least in general. And that's what the challenger starts doing here. But the king's not going to be able to get very far because it does need to stay and defend this pawn, and it can't get out to the second rank because of where that rook is placed. But she moved it as close as she probably could here. The defending champ moves the f-pawn so that their king can get closer to the center. This looks like it's taking advantage of this open file, maybe trying to attack this bishop here at some point, but that allows the black rook to get behind this pawn. And here the challenger played rook to a1, which is what the commentators thought she was going to play because it does offer a rook trade. And at that point, it would be just about a guaranteed draw. So it looked like by this move, on move 36, still no bonus time, she's only got 2 minutes left on the clock. The defending champ only has 7 minutes left on her clock, which is not very much at this high level of chess. Looked like she was basically offering a draw on the board since they're not allowed to offer the draw verbally. But the defending champ, perhaps seeing that she had 5 more minutes than her opponent, decided not to do the offered draw on the board and trade the rooks, and decided to play for maybe a win here, or maybe just trying to get to move 40, I'm not sure, and move the rook back over to challenge the bishop. Well, that forces something to happen with that bishop, either trying to defend it or moving it out of the way, so she moves it out of the way to hit this rook. The rook moves over, and she moved the bishop back. Looked like, again, offering a repetition, but the defending champ didn't go for the repetition here, instead bringing the king. Now, I don't know if white was worried about the king trying to come in this way and help with this pawn somehow, or maybe trying... It doesn't look like it could get next to this bishop here, so I'm not sure exactly what the reason for the next move was, but h4 was the next move. One thing I could think of, I guess, is that it allows the white king to come around this way, since the white king can't come around on the left side of this g-pawn because of the black rook being on the second rank. The defending champ brought this rook up to challenge the bishop once more, and this time the challenger brought their rook over to the d-file to defend the bishop. But that allows the king to come a little closer, but it also allows the white king to come a little closer. But now they're past move 40. If you saw, the clocks have jumped up. So it does look like both players are not playing for a repetition or an obvious draw, which they had a chance for. They're both actually jockeying for position here with their extra time. And it looks like that a pawn is toast, but the evaluation still shows even. Challenger brings her king forward again, and the champ cuts off the king and aiming for this pawn back here, which can only be helped by moving forward, which is what it does. Both players tried a few more maneuvers trying to hang on here, again looking like we might have a repetition with the checks on the second rank, but the champ didn't go for it. And after the challenger threw the rook down there to the back rank, which I think is either attempting to get this bishop out from in front of the pawn, or perhaps trying to get behind the g-pawn over here, that's when the defending champ decided to force the repetition, which she does here, and the king basically has to shuffle back and forth, so the rook forces it to shuffle back and forth. Of course, if the king goes anywhere else that's not defending this pawn, then that's a problem, so it's basically a forced repetition at this point, and on 49 moves, a draw was declared. So we have 3 draws in this series, 1.5 points for each player, with 9 games to go, unless someone starts winning at this point. As with the previous games, I'm sure in a lot of spots in this game, I could have found a way to lose with either color, but it is amazing to watch such high precision chess, and I do thank you for spending time on my channel. I'll see you next time.